Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live, and I'm your host, Tarl Yarber. Once again, we have an amazing lineup for you guys today. Today we have our perpetual guest, Mr. Jay Scott. Just him and I decided to do a Jay Scott and Tarl Yarber deal show and tell just for you guys. We go over a deal of mine that we bought not too long ago. That is a hoarder house that was pretty nasty with the roof collapsed, all sorts of great stuff. We go over some of the major aspects of what it's like to buy a hoarder house and how you can make a lot of money of those, but also you can potentially lose a lot of money and what to look out for. We go over a flip that Jay just bought, plus also a package of 3 BRRRRs that he bought in one whole package, and then analyzing it professionally the way Jay likes to do it. We even go over the pitfalls of flipping, the pitfalls of rentals, the benefits of both, how you develop your buy box, which is your actual acquisition strategy, and what kind of picture of a house that, or a picture of a property that you actually want to buy and what you work in that box, and how you can develop that for yourself as well. And of course, we go over all sorts of financial stuff. This is a opportunity for you guys to watch this on our YouTube channel, which you guys get the most visuals when we start showing photos, but we'll do our best verbally to be able to help you out with this if you guys are listening to this instead of watching it. Check out every single week on Wednesday. We produce these live, so if you want to join us on our actual live broadcasts and webinars when we're doing this, so you can ask questions yourself, you guys can join us every single Wednesday. Be on the lookout for emails and also posts in the future for that, and check out all our past ones. And we'll see you guys in a minute as Jay and I start jumping into our deal show and tell. All right, how's everybody doing? We are live with Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live with my best friend, Mr. Jay Scott.
Whoa, I'm your best friend now?
Because nobody else is on this one at this time.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
it is a moving target week by week. So as you guys can tell, it is just Jay and I this week because nobody loves us but ourselves. So Jay and I, or Jay and me?
Jay and me.
Is that true?
Yeah, because you would say it's just me. So if you would say it's just me, it's just, you wouldn't say it's just I.
I and Jay. Yes, I would.
No, you would say it's just me.
Right. All right, fair enough. I'm a real estate investor. I'm smart. So So I'm excited today because we are doing a new edition of Fixated on Real Estate Live, or Experts Live, where it's just Jay and I. We decided that we wanted to do a deal show and tell for everybody today. Next week, we are going to be doing a BRRRR, Masters of BRRRR panel, round 2. We had so many amazing people that asked so many incredible questions about BRRRR and so forth on the last round when we had Miss Brittany Arneson and Mr. Thatch Nguyen, as well as Jay and I, that we couldn't get to them, and we only went through about half the whole entire process. Very awesome webinar. Go check it out on either our YouTube channel or also Bigger Pockets, and where you can watch both of those right now. Anyways, this week, we're going to jump into some deals. So Jay, you've been buying some projects. I've been buying some projects. We've been, doing our thing.
Hold on. And I want to tell a story of what I did today, because this is a good story. You know what I spent my day doing?
It's all about you. What is it?
It's all about me. So we moved into a new house a couple weeks ago, and I replaced all the doorknobs. And my wife found this amazing deal on Amazon warehouse deals, which anybody out there that rehabs, check out Amazon warehouse deals. It's not like they don't have the same products all the time, but amazing deals. But anyway, we got these amazing doorknobs for like $7, like $30 doorknobs for $7. And she bought the wrong one for one of the doors, and we had a lock, like a key lock on our laundry room door, and locked ourselves out and could not get into our laundry room. Literally had to call a locksmith to get into our laundry room in our house, one of the rooms in our house. He had to take the entire door frame off because it was such a good lock.
That is such a good lock.
So it took,
that is such a good story.
It is. A locksmith spent an hour trying to get into my laundry room. I think that's pretty impressive.
Love it. All right, so let's talk about something fun. So I am impressed by your locksmith, and I appreciate you sharing that for everybody. But we are going to dive into some deals. But on that note, though, you just got back from Houston?
I just got back from Houston.
Why were you in Houston?
So we closed on a 152 unit apartment complex about 2 weeks ago. So my partner, Ashley Wilson, and I were there to do some asset management, to check on the property and make sure the transition was going smoothly. And we were looking for some new deals in Houston. So some new apartment complexes.
Sweet. And how did your syndication go? Did it go without a hitch?
It went great. So we raised, it was a $22 million deal. We raised $8 million of that. The rest was debt, and it was my very first raise, and it went really well. We closed. We were actually ready to close early on it, but we closed. The seller wasn't ready, so we closed the day that we were supposed to close. And my first major multifamily deal was smooth and a success.
Love it. Love it. And also Ashley is an awesome, awesome person. So
Ashley is amazing. She has taught me so much about multifamily. Yeah, she's fantastic.
All right, so let's jump into it. So I want to ask you some questions. So you also been doing some single family homes.
Yeah.
And are you still flipping? Are you doing any buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeats?
Yeah.
What did you purchase recently?
So we've done about 15 single family BRRRRs over the last 2 months. And we've bought about a half dozen flips over the past 2 months. So yeah, we, after many months of basically doing nothing because COVID scared me, and I was a little scared before COVID, I decided to hop off the sidelines. We started finding some good deals, both in my Florida market and the Georgia market where we are. And so yeah, we've been buying a bunch of BRRRRs, and we've been buying a bunch of flips.
Love
What
it.
about you?
So we have been playing a lot. We also ran this unfortunate event called the Virtual Big Badass Real Estate Wealth Expo, where we had 1,728 investors nationwide joining us. So that took me a little bit of a distraction, but we did buy a couple properties in the last 2-3 weeks. So we bought two, woohoo. And I'm also doing a 1031 exchange right now, and I'm looking into I'm looking into Florida for that 1031 right now, and also in Kansas City, believe it or not. So we are upgrading into a property that we sold for $360,000. We had $140,000 net to roll out of it on one of our BRRRRs that we did a couple of years ago. So it's kind of cool to buy a property that you have no money into, and then a couple of years later you get $140K out of it net, and you roll that into something else. It was cash flowing. I'm not going to go over this today, but there will be a YouTube video on Bigger Pockets here in the next couple of weeks, specifically on this property to show a full cycle BRRRR. And we were cash flowing $430 a month on that thing with no money in it, and I am looking to take that 140 net and turn that into at least $1,000, maybe $1,500 a month net cash flow and stuff. So we're looking at different markets for that, and I don't care about appreciation as much anymore. I care more about cash flow. So, but the two flips that we just bought, I think, yeah, we're gonna flip these two. Those should be interesting. I'll share one of them today because it's a piece of shit. So, which I'm allowed to cuss, whatever. And Jay, so do you want to share one of your deals today?
Okay, I'm going to do a quick flip deal, and then you'll do a flip deal, then I'll do my BRRRR.
Sure, you get two, I get one. Let's go.
Okay, let me pull it up. Okay, this property is on 44th Terrace in Cape Coral, Florida. And we purchased it for $113. We've already closed on it. We closed on it about a week and a half ago. We paid $113 for it. Our closing costs were $1,267.87. We pay transfer taxes in Florida, so 70 cents on every 100,000, or every $100, 70 cents on every 1,000. So $791 there. And then commissions received is actually, that was our assignment fee that we paid to the wholesaler. So we paid $10,000 for this deal. So we were all in on the purchase of this for about $125. We expect to put $65,000 in rehab. It's going to be a full cosmetic rehab, plus some electrical, plumbing, and HVAC upgrades. And we're opening up some walls. So it's in Florida, we're spending about 1,700 square foot property. So we're at about 35 to 40 bucks a square foot.
Any pictures?
So I don't have any pictures on this one yet. You didn't give me enough notice that we were doing this. So I don't have any pictures on this one yet, but while you're doing yours, I'll bring up some pictures. So $65,000 is the full rehab, labor, and materials. I don't have a breakdown here, but that's pretty typical for one of our full cosmetic plus some mechanicals around here. We expect about, not really 6 months of holding time. We expect closer to 3 months, but I always like to plan for 6 months. So about 250 bucks a month in property taxes, about 125 bucks a month in insurance. We'll have about 150 bucks in utilities. And then we'll have some lawn care, 50 bucks, 25 bucks every other week for just cutting the lawn. We expect to sell this one for $265. We'll pay the other agent 3%. Our agent, who both my wife and my partner's wife are agents, will get 1.5%. Then we'll pay about $1,000 for closing costs on our end, $1,000 we may have to pay for the seller's closing costs, and then transfer taxes on the back end. We'll walk away with about $249,000 after all is said and done, pay off what we have into it, and we expect our profit to be about $55,600, not pre-commission, that should be pre-tax. So 55,000. And so we like to when we look at ROI on a flip, it's basically our return on the ARV. So it's this 55,000 divided by this 265. We like to see at least 15% of whatever we resell the property in profit. So if we resell something for 200, we want to make 30. This one's coming out at about 21%. So these days I would call that a solid double or triple.
That sounds pretty sweet. So how did you guys find this deal?
So this came from a wholesaler. So we have a wholesaler down here that has done a number of deals with us, or has sold us a number of deals over the last year or so. And we've pretty much gotten into a routine where if it's a typical deal, we'll pay him $10,000. And he knows we can close quickly. He might be able to get a few $1,000s more from other people, but he knows we can close quickly. We're reliable, that he never has to worry about it. So he's brought us probably a dozen deals over the last year. So that's where a lot of our deals in this market are coming from.
And in which specific market is this again?
This is Cape Coral, Florida, which is the central Florida all the way west at the beach.
Got it. And so
not on the beach.
Do you guys foresee any major issues with the rehab on this property?
So this one is actually pretty straightforward. Again, full cosmetic. So when I say full cosmetic, we're basically replacing all this. We're touching every surface. So countertops, cabinets, flooring, paint the walls, all the light fixtures, all the plumbing fixtures. Outside, we'll paint the outside. We're doing a new roof on this one, and we'll upgrade the HVAC, and then we'll make sure that the plumbing and electrical are in good shape. So basically touching every surface, full cosmetic rehab, plus bringing the mechanicals up to date. And again, we're at about $35 to $40 a square foot. For doing that in this market. Don't foresee any major issues on this one. The big one with this one was it took us 5 dumpsters to clean it out.
Nice.
And so it was, and 3 of those were just the garage. So, I mean, major hoarder house. And so anytime you have a hoarder house, assume that you're gonna have to go all the way down to the sheetrock.
Yeah, or at least portions of it in certain parts.
Yeah,
when you have all the stuff stacked up. And it's how long was it empty too? Or did somebody live in it?
Somebody was living there.
Yeah. Especially in Florida, I can imagine you guys get, because all the humidity, you get a lot more moisture and mold, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
as well.
And luckily we run a mold remediation company as well, so that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, definitely look out for mold in hoarder houses.
Hoarder houses have been sometimes one of the most profitable houses that we've ever done. Absolutely. Because sometimes when you get rid of all the stuff, you don't know how bad the condition of the house is. Fully, you can tell it's bad, right? But you can't really tell everything. And then you remove all the stuff and you're like, actually, this isn't that bad. But you bid it and you bought it as if it was, right? So sometimes and then sometimes you remove all the stuff and you're like, oh crap, this is way worse than we thought. So, but most of the time from my experience, it's the other way around, where it's usually pretty good after you remove all the junk. Yep. We did have one, if you guys go on YouTube on Bigger Pockets, it was a bad deal that we did that I made $2,100 on by the time we got out of it. And it was a major hoarder house that there was zero chance we can actually fully evaluate the property before buying it, because there was just so much stuff that was in it. That once we got it all out, we bid it's going to cost $100,000. We thought that was way over the price that we actually needed to put into the project. We're like, oh, it's probably 60 and 70, but let's just put 100 just in case as far as rehab. We get into this thing, we demo, we remove all the stuff. Didn't look so bad, but we couldn't get into attic spaces and really start checking out the framing on the house. We start doing the demo to rechange the floor plan. Half the house almost falls apart and starts splitting because it was so badly remodeled by a past homeowner, and the house started splitting in half because there was no shear walls anywhere. And it ended up costing us almost $160,000 to do the rehab. And that was the only real hoarder house that it got real. So
Yeah, hoarder houses can kick your butt.
yeah, but they could be amazing. So at the same time. Cool. Well, I'm gonna take this up one level, Jay. I'm gonna show photos, and while I'm showing my stuff, you can look for photos on yours too, and take it up to 11. So on this particular deal, right? And one of the things I liked about your deal too is that you guys still had if you bought it cash, are you guys buying it all cash? Or are you guys financing it with?
Yeah, so we are fortunate that we can buy stuff cash these days. So we didn't have to worry about loan costs, origination fees, mortgage, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I like even so we can dig into this a little bit more for sure later, but like I still analyze, even though we might finance our deals, I still analyze my deals as if we're buying it all cash and rehabbing cash to find out what that net ROI is. And that's that margin. So like I'm always looking for a 15 plus or 20 plus cash on cash. And once I add finance costs in it, then I'll know I'll be good to go and I'm fine, right? If I had to do it. So but I'll go into that a little bit on mine. But you showed that on yours. So you had that 21% at the bottom of your P&L, and I'm like, yeah, that's a sweet freaking deal. I'd buy that. And
yeah, most of ours are if we're getting 15 these days, we're happy. So 21 is really good.
Totally. So this is my peach. It's in Federal Way, and it's a little different today because we already replaced the roof. But one thing to check out that's hard to tell sometimes from pictures, that is a cedar shake roof. Right. And the cedar shake roof was failing pretty bad. And one thing too, which is a trick that you'll hear some roofers do. If you have a cedar shake roof, that's an original cedar shake roof and you have to replace it, typically it has something called skip sheeting underneath it. And what skip sheeting is just pieces of like 2x6s that are just along in a horizontal way. And then the cedar goes on top of it and there's gaps. You can't put 30-year architectural comp on top of skip sheeting. So what you typically have to do is rip off all the cedar shake and then put all brand new sheeting on the entire roof. And then you could put 30-year architectural comp. So one side note for rehab is that if you have a roofer that sees the cedar shake and wants to rip it off and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea there was skip sheeting here. It's going to cost you another $5,000 to do the sheeting. They're lying to you. So I'm just telling you that up front. They know there's skip sheeting and it's a change order situation. So one way to check out if there is skip sheeting is to go into the attic space and look up. And if you see a bunch of 2x6s horizontal, and then you see the shake right underneath that or above that, then you have skip sheeting. So this house, we already knew it had skip sheeting. So it would end up being an expensive roof just mainly because, it's a big roof and it needed skip sheeting. Needed all new sheeting. So it cost about $10,000 to finish that roof out. But this was a house that was condemned. You can see there's a green notice here that unfortunately we don't have a photo of on this group of pictures. But it was the police department. It kept having a massive amount of squatters. And the police department shut it down saying don't occupy. Plus, we're not even allowed to rehab it until we cleared it out. You could tell there's a lot of discoloration in this house a little bit when you see the photos. And because it had a roof leak, ta-da, look at that beautiful roof leak. And that's nasty with the couch. Can you imagine that at one point somebody was sleeping on that? And there is the dining area where there's another roof leak. And one of the issues with water, Jay, what's one of the things that can happen with water besides mold?
I hate water. So
I love
besides
drinking it, but
so besides mold, so
what kind of water damage what kind of damage can water do besides mold?
Oh, water can do structural damage. So water sitting against wood can cause wood rot. So you can see major structural damage. Basically, obviously, it can cause sheetrock damage. It can cause mold. Water can destroy foundations.
Yep.
Water. I'll take water over concrete any day in a head-to-head match.
Totally. So on that note, this is like the ceiling, right? So or the where the roof is. So this is that you see the 2x, actually there are 2x8s on this one, but that cross 2x8s, that's the sheet, that's the skip sheeting that I was mentioning to everybody. And then these are trusses, and then that's the exterior framing or the header for the framing out there. And if water's been hitting this for a long time, you can see it's pretty dark colored framing. So that means that there's a good chance that there might be dry rot in there, depending on how long it's been that way, which is caused by water. So there might be structural framing damage on this property, which we bid for when we bought it, which means like, is this entire truss messed up, which luckily it wasn't, but this header right here is. So we're gonna have to do some stuff with there, and there's some 2x4s we got to replace. But that's part of when you're bidding it out. But you can tell it's a pretty beautiful, nasty house. There's another roof leak here, and Nate takes horrible photos, so bear with me. Nate, if you're watching this. So you can tell. Anyways, let's get through this. So nasty, nasty, nasty house, right? Lots of wine, which is good, I guess. The mold everywhere. Who wants to jump into that house, right? But in reality, when you look after you get into it for us, despite that there's all this garbage, and look, that's from the water heater. That's and also garbage. So that's tasty. You could like smell the money in that photo, right? One of the things that's nice about hoarder, look at how many wine bottles there are. Like there's a bunch in the living room too. They had them nice and organized. So old furnace, messed up water heater, both gas. The panel is in there, which was actually a good panel. The actual floor plan on this house wasn't bad. So when we're looking at comps, why we bought it, it's a tighter, I'll tell you the truth. When I show you the numbers, it's a tighter margin house for us, but it's also a really easy rehab for us. Because when you're looking at this, or when I'm looking at this, I go, floor plan's good. I don't need to change the floor plan, right? Roof is messed up. Cool. All right. Well, that's a roofer, and put some sheeting on it, right? We're good to go. And there's some water damage, but we know where that is because there's big holes, right? So we know where there's potential damage. So like, all right, well, that's the only structural potential stuff and some sheetrock. Okay, there's a bunch of mold and mildew in areas. Cut that out, put new sheetrock. That's fine. Any places that are kind of like, don't need to really cut out, we kills primer and like mold remediation and all that kind of stuff, those areas. Cool. And then the rest of it is all cosmetic, 100%. So sometimes for those of you guys, especially if you're newer on a BRRRR or flips, you might look at a house like this going like, this is above my pay grade. When we look at it going like, okay, new roof, whatever, that's easy. Just bid for it. You can get a roofer to go bid that before you even like buy the house, because they don't even need to go into it. And you got sheetrock damage. Look at Nate in that mirror. He's looking good. Everything else though is just pure cosmetic at that point once you rip it out. And once you rip it all out, you're just down to base, trim, doors, cabinets, flooring, all your fixtures, your showers and your bathtubs and paint, right? So basically all the cosmetic stuff that you need to upgrade anyways, right? So I looked at this going like, yeah, whatever. Okay, sure. We're going to spend like $5,000 on demo, trash, all that kind of stuff, plus another 10 on the roof. So there's 15, and some sheetrock, probably another 5. And then framing's nothing because there's nothing to do. And then the rest of it's just pure cosmetic. Good to go, right? So what our numbers end up being on this one is a little bit more tighter than what I like, right? But it's also a no-brainer house for us because it's an easy one for us. So this is our little spreadsheet. So it shows we bought it for 300. We think it's worth 489, and it's probably going to cost us 85 grand in rehab for us. Pacific Northwest is a little expensive, just so you know, for rehab costs. And then, the holding time is going to be more than that, but we don't add any holding costs in our analysis for when we're doing the number, because we're just looking for this number right here, which is 17% cash on cash return, right? Now, I do kind of skew it a little bit because, most real estate commissions is 6% or 5. So that brings it down to 15 if we're doing that. But we pay 4.5 because we do it internally. And so it's in reality for us, it's 17. So, but if I add any kind of holding costs, so let's say on this property, if I'm going to finance 100% of the purchase and rehab, that's $385,000. If I'm paying a 10% interest on $385,000, then that's $38,500 a month, right? So that's, $38,500 a year in interest cost. And if it takes me 5 months to do this project, then that's 18 grand in holding costs, and my profit goes down to 50K, right? After holding costs, if I'm doing the 10% interest. If I'm paying points on this thing, so I would just add this over here for me, then let's say I pay 2 points on that 3,800. So what is that, like 70, that's 7 grand, 74, 7,800, something like that. So let's call it 7,400 points or $7,400. Now, okay, now if I really did pay if I pay 2 points, 10%, which we're a little bit less than that, but that's a standard hard money loan out there right now for a lot of places. And that's financing 100% of it with no money down. Then, it's still a net profit of 44,800, right? I start to ignore this 10.9% though, once I start putting finance charges in it. Because for me, where I look at it is I go like, well, what's my margin of error of 17%, I add finance. So this is what I care about, the 17. I don't look at this until after I put the finance charges in to see, is it worth it now for me to do it? So 17% means, cool, I can take the hit. I know if the shit goes wrong, it takes me a while before things really go wrong. And I'm confident on the rehab. I'm confident on the ARV. It's an easy rehab for us. Why wouldn't I buy it at a 17%? Now let me throw the finance charging in there to see if it at least makes a certain dollar amount to make it worth our time. So that's how I do it, right? Jay, how do you prefer to analyze your deal?
For me, it really boils down to the 15% of resale value. That's the number that I look for. And it doesn't matter if it's a 3-month deal, 6-month deal, a 12-month deal. For me, I'm just really looking for that. And it doesn't matter if I'm financing it. It doesn't matter if I'm paying cash. It doesn't matter if I'm a partner. Now, I'm not going to say I don't deviate from that if it's a high risk deal, if it's going to be a really long deal, if it's something that for some reason I feel like I could get hit on the deal, there's market risk or whatever, then yeah, I might look for more. But my first pass analysis is kind of that 15% number, and more times than not, if I hit that number, I'm going to move forward and at least with seriously considering the deal.
I love that. So any advice to anybody that you can give for how to structure their own buy box, like their own strategy for purchasing? Like, we all have a buy box. You just said yours, which is 15% cash on cash, is what you're really looking at, right? So, and I'm sure there's other things like geography probably has an aspect to it. And,
absolutely.
You know, the size of remodel and rehab might have some sort of aspect to it, I would guess, potentially, depending on if you're the operator or somebody else is maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure there's like other aspects to it, but like if you're going, like for me, it's 15% for a flip, 20+% for a BRRRR, right? Cash on cash needs to be in King of Pierce County right now for state of Washington. I don't want it to be over $125,000 in remodel costs if I'm the operator.
Yep.
If I'm partnered with somebody else, it could be as much as it wants, as long as I have confidence in them. I don't want to do any ground up. I don't want to do any pop tops, and I don't want to do any additions. So that's my buy box, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to give somebody advice on how to create their own, what advice can you give?
Well, first I would point out that when you're talking about flips versus rentals, very different things.
Yes.
With flips, you're concerned about risk. I can do a flip and in 6 months, I'm probably going to be done with that flip. So I don't care long-term about getting the numbers right. I care very much short-term. And I care very much about not losing a lot of money short-term, but I'm not going to be locked into that deal. So if I make a mistake and instead of making a $50,000 profit, I make a $5,000 profit, well, that's not going to affect me 10 years into the future. It's going to suck over the next 3 months, and I'm putting a lot of work in and only making 5,000, but that deal will be behind me. So from a flip perspective, I'm looking at risk. And typically I want my profits to be enough that my worst case scenario, if everything goes wrong, I overpay, I underestimate the rehab budget, if it takes longer to rehab than I expected, if I sell it for less than I expected, basically if I make a mistake every step of the way, I'm still pretty much insulated from taking a loss. Mm-hmm. So if I make a mistake on every assumption on a deal at 15% profit, I'm probably close to a break-even point. I'm okay with break-even because, again, in 3 months, 6 months, I'm moving on to the next deal. For a buy and hold, it's very different. A buy and hold, you're doing buy and holds to reach your long-term goals. And if you make a mistake on a buy and hold today, that mistake can affect you tomorrow, next month, next year, 10 years from now if you're still holding that property. So it's a lot more important that you get the numbers right for a buy and hold than it is for a flip. For a flip, again, you just care about that major risk. For a buy and hold, you don't want to break even because break even can hurt you for the next 20 years. So for a buy and hold, I would tell people, make sure you validate all of your numbers, validate your rents. Don't just assume, I think this is $1,500 a month. No, talk to a good property manager, talk to a good real estate agent, and validate that. Validate, obviously, the two things that you can easily validate, which are taxes and insurance. You always can find out how much those things cost. Validate your property management fees. I see a lot of people who will talk to a property manager. The property manager will say, I charge 10% of the gross rent per month. And what that means is if it's $1,000 a month in gross rent, the property manager is going to take 10% of that. And if they don't collect rent for a month, they're going to take nothing. So they assume I'm going to lose 10% of my gross rent to the property manager. But there are other fees that property managers charge that if you don't ask them, you're not going to find out until it's too late. And by too late, I mean when they're already managing the property. And that's like most of my property managers charge some percentage of the first month rent to place a tenant. And that can be anywhere from 40 to 70% of the first month rent. My property managers typically charge a renewal fee. So if if a tenant re-signs a lease, they're going to take a few bucks there. My property managers might take a fee if there's an eviction, just to cover their time and effort. So your property managers are going to charge more than just that monthly fee. So make sure you know all the fees. And if the property manager says I'm charging 10% of gross rent, your property management fee is probably closer to 12% of gross rent. So make sure you get that right. A lot of people don't think about turnover costs. So you think about maintenance, and yeah, when something breaks, you have to fix it. But what happens when a tenant leaves? You might have to repaint the place. You might have to put in new carpet. You might have to replace the appliances. There's turnover costs. And if you don't have long-term tenants, you're going to be paying these turnover costs once every year, once every other year. So factor that in. And then always factor in your CapEx or your capital costs. So you may not have to replace the roof for another 30 years. But let's say replacing that roof is going to cost you $10,000. Well, that $10,000 over the next 30 years is some number of dollars a month. It might be $5 a month or $3 a month. And you should be factoring that in because, yeah, you might not have to think about the roof for 5 or 10 or 30 years, but the day you have to think about it, your numbers are going to get hit really hard. So factor that in from the beginning. And so that's the biggest mistake I see with buy and hold investors is that they're thinking about next week's cost. They're not thinking about the fact that their property is going to be vacant at some point. They're like, yeah, I have a tenant in there now, so 100% occupancy. They're not thinking about the fact that one day there's going to be an eviction and your tenant's not going to pay for 2 or 3 months before you can get them out. So factor all this stuff in, be conservative, because again, when you get into a buy and hold deal, it's not something that stops affecting you in a few months like a flip. It's something that's going to be eating at you or helping you for years and years into the future.
Well, you just tore down a bunch of buy and hold investors. My turn to tear down and fix and flip people then. So if you don't mind that. So it's fair. But on the other side, like, you make a mistake on a buy and hold, then just wait, right? Like you can also do that. You just like, it might take you 10 or 15 years later, but eventually like it'll figure itself out, right? Buy a flip that you really, really mess up on your numbers initially, like you can lose everything. And so because you might not be able to even turn it into a buy and hold at that point. So I would challenge that a little bit on the flip side. It's like, oh, it's only 3 months. Yeah. Well, yeah, that 3 months, all of a sudden you bought a property that it has to like be torn down or whatever, because like some sort of like code violation issue and all this other crazy stuff, or there's a major septic issue you didn't realize it's going to cost $50,000 in King County, Washington, because that's what it costs here. And there's issues with that. There goes your budget, and there goes your life savings, and there goes like, yeah, you can lose everything on a flip like a lot sooner than you could on a buy and hold, in my opinion. Because on a buy and hold, just to kind of tear that a little bit, is that typically like if you're going to go do permanent financing on a buy and hold, it has to qualify, right? So which means that you have to, for permanent financing, if you're buying it with like a BRRRR, that's different. Like a BRRRR is a flip until you refinance it, right? And until you put a tenant in it, it's a flip. And so with a buy and hold that you put 20% down, then and you're not buying it cash, you have to qualify, right? Which means the property has to qualify too. So you do have a couple of protection layers, in your back pocket, at least on a buy and hold, compared to a flip that you're buying is like with a hard money lender or private funding or your own cash. Like there's no protection there. It's pure you, right? So, and if you miss something pretty big on a simple house, all of a sudden you can lose all your profit, if not more. And so and so forth, which I've come close to. I lost 86 grand on one house, right? And to some people that's like everything. And so so that said, there's risks to both sides. And so what I believe is figure out what works for you as an investor, what your risk tolerance is, what your buy box is, and then stick to it. Right. And don't get all excited when you hear somebody else do something else. Like stick to yours until you're good at it, and then move on and add on. But I've seen a lot of fix and flip people, like they start at cosmetic, then they start adding bathrooms, then they start remodeling restructuring the whole house, and then they start adding additions, then they get into new builds, and then they just keep stacking and stacking, and all of a sudden they mess up on one big one because their ego's so big and they've never lost and they lose it all. So I've seen that. So So have you, right? So I would just, not to scare everybody away from investing. I think that's what you and I do the best at, Jay, is we scare people from investing. But
that's good, because I want people to be scared on their first deal and their second deal. I want you to do it, but be scared enough to be conservative. And then once you get through that first or second, you'll realize, okay, I was a little too scared, but being scared kept me from doing anything really dumb.
Totally. And then don't be upset when you miss out on really good deals because you're too scared. It might be a good thing, because a good deal for somebody else might be a bad deal for you, and vice versa. So do you have another thing you want to share, Jay, before we start?
I do. I have a BRRRR deal. And so here, let me bring this up. Okay, so this was a 3-property BRRRR deal. So I invest in a small town in Georgia. I invest in a small town in Georgia, and we work with a small local bank, a portfolio lender down there. And the VP of lending called my partner a couple months ago and said, I got this deal for you. I have a friend who owns 3 properties. He's looking to sell all 3. He just wants to get out. If you buy it, we'll finance it. And we'll do an initial financing for the purchase, and then we'll do refi once you get it tenanted and stabilized. So basically a BRRRR deal that the bank brought us, and the bank said, we'll give you financing on the front end, and then we'll give you a refi on the back end after it's stabilized. So ended up being these 3 properties. As you can see, this first one on the left, cute little house, typical rental looking house. Inside, I mean, basically it was rent ready. There are a few things. We had to replace the roof. The roof was old, but in general, this thing was rent ready. We put in stainless steel appliances versus the white to get a few extra dollars. But this was under a 10K rehab. The second property was move-in ready. I mean, it was basically gorgeous. It had stainless steel appliances. It had been renovated. I think there was 1 tenant since the last renovation. So it needed a couple $1,000s. In this third property, this is the one that needed a little bit more work. I think it was like 15 or 20. But essentially, we were all into all 3 properties with less than 35,000 rehab. So let's take a look, and let's see. I'm going to stop sharing there. Let's take a look at what this deal looked like, and then I'll go into a spreadsheet so we can see in more detail. But this was the high-level overview of the deal. So three properties. Our purchase price for all 3 properties was $215,000. We got an appraisal from the bank before they financed it, the as-is appraisal. So if we had just turned around and resold those properties on day one, $305,000 was what the appraiser thought they were worth. So we were working with about $90,000 in equity on day one. So this was a great deal. Like I said, renovation was about $35,000. So between the $215,000 purchase and the $35,000 renovation, our all-in costs was $250,000. The bank agreed to give us 75% loan to cost, which means they took that $250,000 actual cost and said, we'll give you 75% of that to purchase. You come up with the rehab funds or the rest of the funds. So we had to come up with $62,000 out of pocket, which we did. We renovated the 3 properties. Actually, we're in the middle of renovating the 3 properties, but 2 of them are now renovated. 1 of them is in the middle of renovation. When we are done, we expect the properties to appraise for $420,000, the 3 of them. The same bank told us that they will, when they're tenanted and reappraised, they will give us 75% of loan to value. So 75% of the appraised value. So if it appraises for $420,000, the bank will refi us $315,000, which is 75% of that. So since we are technically into this for $250,000, which is a $188,000 loan and a $62,000 cash infusion, and they're going to give us $315,000. Basically, we can pull out $65,000 from that refi if we want to. We don't have to pull it all out, but we can pull out $65,000, so we could have all of our money out of this deal plus an extra $65,000 out when this deal is done. Assuming we did that, our rents for the 3 properties are $3,250 a month. That's our gross rents, and that puts us at an all-in value of $315,000 on the loan. That's about a 1.03% rule. So it's about the 1% rule. So we're getting about 1% of the total all-in costs per month.
So I'm assuming that's like a cash flow of around like 12 or 1,400 a month or something like that, or?
So it's actually less than that, and we can go and look at that. So this is the analysis of the deal after we have all our money out on the back end. We're all in for $420,000. Our down payment is, well, not really a down payment. It's not a cash down payment, but our equity is 25%. Like I said, the bank is willing to lend $315,000 on that. About a 4% interest rate over 25 years. So our mortgage payment's about $1,600 a month. Monthly rent is $3,250 a month. We're assuming about 8% of vacancy. Down here, our expenses, we assume, we know our property taxes are right at $3,000. Our insurance is at $1,950 a year. Maintenance and repairs, I like to do $50 per month per property. So $1,800 across the 3 properties. Utilities, we don't pay utilities, but anytime there's a vacancy, and this is another one of those be conservative, anytime there's a vacancy, the utilities go back in our name. So we will be paying some utility costs when the property is vacant. I like to assume $200 per property per year. Turnover costs, again, when the tenants leave, we have to do some general paint and carpet and just refresh of the property. I like to assume $600 per property per year. Our PM costs, we're at 8% PM costs, but again, there are some fees on top of that. So I model it at 11. That's really conservative. But even though it's only 8% of the gross rent, those extra fees take it up. And then there's that extra capital cost, which is the roof and the HVAC and the electrical and the plumbing. All those things are brand new right now in these properties, are almost brand new, but we're gonna have those costs over time. I like to assume about $50 per month per property. So we talk about the 50% rule, which is on average for a lot of properties in a lot of areas around the US, the total expenses over time is about 50% of the gross rent. Half your rent goes away to all of these expenses and vacancy. We came up with about a 40% loss of that. Our operating expense is about 46%, which is pretty close to 50%. So that's a good, it tells us that we're in the ballpark there. We are cash flowing, and again, this assumes we're taking our $65,000 out, so we have $0 invested in the property, and we've gotten $65,000 out. We're making $1,000 a year. So we are making money plus the $65,000 in our property. If we
but your annual cash flow is $1,000.
Annual cash flow is $1,000.
$80 a month.
$80 a month, but again, we got $60,000 out. And I'm going to talk to this in just a second, but let's say we left the $65,000 in. Let's say we just wanted to get all of our cash out, but we didn't actually want to take more out. We wanted to cash flow. Finance would be about, we were $250,000 in, so at 40%, it's about 252. So we'd be making about, if we had all of our cash out, and we just didn't take out the extra $65,000, we're making $5,000 per year. So not bad, given that we have $0 into this property.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing.
Properties,
yes. Here's the other thing. People talk about the cash flow, and everybody looks at the cash flow, but in a BRRRR deal, in a buy and hold deal, there's more than just cash flow. So yeah, for our cash flow, we're getting the 1% rule here. So we are getting that, let's say we leave the $65,000 in, we're getting $5,000 per year in cash flow. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that, with zero money in the deal, but I'm getting other stuff. So if those properties are worth $420,000, well, 70% of the property, in this area at least, is building value versus land value. Building value can be depreciated. So 70% of 420 is $294,000. I can depreciate $294,000 of this property over 27.5 years. That's about $10,700 a year. So I'm getting tax benefits of $10,700 a year in addition to that cash flow. So that's really nice. I mean, if let's say I'm at the 20% tax rate, let's say I'm not a smart investor and I can't get my taxes down to $750 a year. Let's say I'm at a 20% tax rate. Basically, I'm saving $2,000 in actual money per year over 27 years on this property. So tax benefits are nice. Amortization is basically the principal pay down. Every month, my tenant's paying me, I'm paying my mortgage. Part of that mortgage is principal, part is interest. And the principal part is the amount that's subtracted from the loan every month. So my loan is getting cheaper and cheaper to pay off every month. I'm going to make about $4,000 a year on that particular loan in amortization. So in addition to $5,000 a year in cash flow, in addition to $10,000 in depreciation, I'm also getting $4,000 of the tenant paying down my loan every year. And then finally, there's appreciation. I don't like to bank on appreciation. I would never buy a property based on appreciation. But if I'm lucky and I see some appreciation, that's just bonus on this property. So these are the four things that we're getting out of any buy and hold deal. It's not just cash flow. And so when you look at all four of these, this deal becomes a home run. I have $0 into this property and I'm getting $5,000 a year out of it, $10,000 a year in depreciation, $4,000 a year in principal pay down, and who knows, maybe some appreciation as well.
Well, that's like grown-up stuff, because like when I flipped far more houses than I wish I did, and I never thought about any of that stuff that you're showing right there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, why would anybody buy this property? Like, that's so dumb. And then, but when you think about the grown-up side of investing is like depreciation, tax benefits, in loan pay down, the fact that you're gaining a certain rate of return on the actual money itself, those sort of aspects. But it's really the tax benefits and the depreciation that like is something that took me a long time to realize was an actual real investment strategy. And where some people, they invest purely for the depreciation because maybe they have a high income in other areas or they have cash flow coming in from other things that they need to pay less taxes on. So, and one way to do that is investing in real estate because of the depreciation. So eventually you get to a point in your business, your career, your something where you run out of tax strategies to pay less taxes. And some people are like, okay, well, I need to go invest in something to get depreciation in order to be able to pay less taxes. So, which is something that took me longer than I wish it took me to realize was an actual investment strategy at times.
And here's the cool thing. So I mentioned earlier that I had the $65,000 in equity that I can leave in the deal, or that the lender is willing to hand me, like they're going to give me all my money back. Plus they're willing to hand me an extra $65,000 if I want at the end. The difference is if I leave the $65,000 in, I'm making $5,000 a year versus $1,000 a year of just taking it all out. But if I take that $65,000 out, I'm making $4,000 less a year, right? I'm negative $4,000 because I took out that $65,000. I'm making less cash flow. But what am I going to do with that $65,000? Let's say I take that $65,000 and I put it into a flip that, again, I'm making 15% on. So if I do that, that $65,000 is another $9,750 from that flip. Let's say that flip takes me 6 months, so I can do that twice a year. So that $97,500 is actually double that, $19,500. So I might be losing $4,000 by leaving that $65,000 in equity in the deal. But if I take it out, I can potentially make another $20,000 off of that $65,000. This BRRRR deal put $65,000
and pay half the tax because of the $10,690 of depreciation. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, this BRRRR deal put enough money in my pocket that I'm making another $20,000 off of this BRRRR deal just with the extra cash it's given me. Now, don't get me wrong, there are risks. If I take out the $65,000, now I have a higher loan to value. I have more leverage. If the market drops, I'm at more risk. So I may not want to do that. But even with that $65,000 out, I'm still at 75% loan to value. The market could drop 25% and I'm still not underwater on this property. So we'll probably, when it comes down to it, we'll probably take that $65,000 out. We'll use it towards our flips and we'll make $20,000 a year. Basically off of this BRRRR deal, we'll make an extra $20,000 per year because we got that $65,000 out.
Yeah, I'll just add that's like the only time that I wouldn't do what Jay just said would be if you don't know what to do with the 65,000 when you take it out and you go buy a car and all sorts of wasted liabilities. So that would be the only other side caveat is that like we never took money out of, we have quite a few BRRRRs, never cashed out on any of them because we didn't know what we would do with the money. So like for us personally, and that's now we are, right? We are now, but.
So remember, if we leave that $65,000 in the deal, we're making $4,000 of extra cash flow every year.
Yes. So
in the deal, that $65,000 is generating $4,000 a year. So if we divide 4,000 into 65,000, we see that 65,000 is generating for us a 6.15% return. When do you take the $65,000 out? When you can generate more than 6% return on that money. If I can't get better than 6% return on that money, I'm going to leave it in the deal. If I can get better than 6.15% return on something else, I'm taking it out and I'm putting it towards that.
Absolutely. And if you just took it out and left it in your bank account, sure, you might be getting your 0.5%, but you're actually losing probably like -3% on your buying power. And that's just going to get worse and worse and worse as inflation continues to get. So there's more to it on the financial education side than just simple real estate numbers. There's financial numbers, like actual financial education here that I hope all of you guys are hearing this. Now is the time to really study this stuff if you're not in it. And if you're in it, really study it because you're going to need it. So we're only going to answer one question, then we're going to jump off. We got a question that is there a bank that gives loans for rehab? Yes, but not a bank. So there's some, if you're buying the property for a flip and you need the rehab funds, then typically you're going to go through a hard money lender. But if you're buying a property on the purchase side and you need rehab funds and it's for investment purposes, a traditional bank typically won't have programs where they give you the rehab too. You typically have to go through a hard money lender or a bridge lender or something along those lines to be able to get that. If it's your personal residence, then that you already live in, yeah, there's plenty of banks that'll help you with a rehab. It's called a cash out refi or a HELOC. So there's also 203K loans as well, but those are for primary residences. And there are some weird ones out there. I think they got rid of them for the most part on the HUD or the FHA 203K. I don't think they have them for investors anymore. But traditionally, yes, I've gotten tons of rehab funds from lenders, but they're hard money lenders, bridge lenders, private lenders, that kind of stuff. So some bigger projects like multifamily and so forth and whatnot, you might have partnerships with local credit unions where they help with rehab and whatnot as well. But that's where you just start getting creative. But hope that answers. Anything you want to add on that, Jay, before we sign off?
Nope, that was a good answer.
So, Jay, always happy to have you. Next week, we will be doing BRRRR Round 2 with Brittany Arneson and Thatch Nguyen, and of course, Jay Scott, our perpetual guest for Fixated on Real Estate Live. Hope you guys could join us. We're going to dig into a whole bunch of cool shit next week. Jay, how can everybody get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah, wow. I wasn't expecting that question. Well, my website, jscott.com, my Instagram, jscott_123flip. Hey, I am at like 9,700 Instagram followers. I've been told I need to hit that 10,000 number. So everybody that's listening to this, follow me on Instagram. Again, jscott_123flip. And if you want to send me an email, letter J at jscott.com.
And I am Tarl Yarber with Fixated Real Estate. You can follow me at Tarl Yarber on Instagram. And I have less followers than Jay, so I need him more than him. At one point, I had more. And at one point, we were equal. And then now he's way past me. So you're lucky.
I'm older than you. I've had more time.
That's true. He's more experienced, more time. Right. So I don't even have a website. I need to get a website called tarlyarber.com, but I don't have it. Oh, shit.
I think the other Tarl Yarber has it.
That's true. Yeah, there's only one. Anywho, one day I'll be as cool as Jay. That's the only reason why I hang out with him. That said, happy to have you all with us. We'll see you next week on Fixated on Real Estate Live. Thank you, Jay.
See you guys.
Bye.